Our father was a teacher, and he taught us all a thing or two in life. He had a few sayings he liked to recount whenever he wanted to be fatherly. An hour's work before lunch is worth 2 hours' work after lunch. Or when we were on a holiday, an hour's driving before lunch is worth 2 hours driving after lunch. If there are less than 15 people in the room, you can speak while sitting down. If there are more than 15 people in the room, stand up to speak. But if you're going to stand up to speak, make sure you have something to say. We only have 10 people here in person today, and I don't know how many people online, but it doesn't matter. If I was there in person, I would be standing up, because today I have something to say. Colin Thomas Crawford was born on September 12, 1936, to Maria and Robert Crawford, the younger brother to older siblings Murray and Jim. He was born in South Melbourne at Dalkeith Private Hospital at 314 Albert Road. He grew up in the family home 500 metres away at 21 St Vincent's Place, Albert Park. He left home when he married in 1965, moved just 200 metres away to 22 Dundas Place, Albert Park, and as the family got bigger, upsized and moved to 324 Albert Road, South Melbourne in 1975, just 5 houses or 30 metres away from where he was born. He then lived there for the next 45 years until he passed away peacefully at home on August 10, 2020. In all, he achieved the rare feat of living his entire life of almost 84 years, apart from a year as a young teacher in Matoa in the Wimmera and his various overseas travels, in just 3 houses, all within 500 metres of where he was born. I think that is worth reflecting upon for a moment. As our lives become increasingly globalised and mobilised, I think it will become increasingly rare to find someone who has lived their entire life in the one place and die within a dropkick of where they were born, especially when that place is an inner suburb of Melbourne. Just as a sense of place and of country is important to our First Nations peoples, so too was a sense of place of South Melbourne to Dad. It could be said that he had red and white blood in his veins. Dad told stories of growing up in South Melbourne in the 1940s and early 50s, selling newspapers at Albert Park Station, playing with his brother Jim and climbing trees in St Vincent's Gardens, swimming at the beach at the end of Victoria Avenue, catching yabbies in Albert Park Lake, picking mussels from the pylons of Crawford Road Pier. Good times. Dad was baptised in his very church, St Peter's and Paul's, South Melbourne, and went to primary school in the parish school next door. He made many good friends there who were to be part of his life right up until the day that he passed away. He was fortunate enough to be offered a scholarship to Christian Brothers College, North Melbourne, where he went right through to matriculation. He went on to study at Toorak Teachers College and commenced his lifelong career of primary school education as a teacher and ultimately as a principal. Dad met our mum, Geraldine Rale, through mutual friends in South Melbourne in 1962. Mum was a country girl from East Trentham, near Kyneton, but her grandparents had lived in Cecil Street and Montague Street. When she came to the city to work, she lived in a girls' hostel in St Vincent's Place. Mum and Dad married at East Trentham in January 1965, and after a honeymoon in Tasmania, settled into their new house in Dundas Place, Albert Park. I was born in the following year, in 1966, my sisters Anne in 1968 and Jane in 1974. There are 4 themes that run central to Dad's long life: family, sport, travel, and South Melbourne. And when 2 or more of those themes intersect is where he had his happiest times and our happiest memories. Dad's early love of sport, especially athletics and travel, was crystallised when the 1956 Olympic Games were held in Melbourne, at the closing ceremony when IOC President Avery Bundridge said, "Let the youth of the world gather in Rome in 4 years' time," Dad and his brother Jim said, "Yes, we'll be there." Together, they travelled the world for 2 years, attended the Rome Olympics, and significantly spent 6 months working and living in Germany. This helped to develop Dad's lifelong love of all things German, and the family that Dad stayed with in Gladbeck became lasting family friends, which has continued over the decades, with the children and grandchildren each making regular visits to each other. Having a father who was a school teacher meant that he got school holidays just as we did, and through our childhood years there was always a trip to summer in Victoria and beyond every school holidays, regular trips to our grandparents' farm in East Trentham as well. These holidays were as important to our education as our schooling. These holidays were also complemented by some major overseas travel, and I remember missing a whole year of school as a 6-year-old in 1972 as our young family travelled to England by ship, toured around Europe for 7 months in a camper van, attended the Munich Olympics, and then another 5-week journey by ship back to Australia. These travels became more frequent in the post-retirement years, and Mum and Dad had a number of memorable holidays in Europe, Asia, and America, as well as across Australia. Through their inspiration, they planted the travel bug in their 3 children, and all have been equally inspired. Dad's passion for running led to a lifelong involvement in South Melbourne Harriers, later South Melbourne Athletic Club. In 1951, his brother Jim joined South Melbourne Harriers, getting his name in the paper for doing nothing but being a new member. Dad was so impressed that he joined the club too. He was president for 33 years and a competitor for 46, and was proud to have been made a life member early on. Whilst he had many achievements on the track, one of his proudest was wearing the red and white hoops of South Melbourne whilst running the Boston Marathon in 1995 at the age of 58. Again, sport, travel, South Melbourne. Dad was also passionate about his football and the Bloods. His own football career involved playing at Esplanade Colts, South Melbourne YCW, South Melbourne City and South Melbourne Districts, plus 6 games with South Melbourne under-19s and stints in the country at Matoa and Gisborne. Through following my own junior and senior football career, he gave much off-field support to South Melbourne Districts Football Club and was made a life member in 2002. Living across the road from the Lake Oval, the original home of South Melbourne and the ancestral home of the Sydney Swans, allowed Dad to give full support to his beloved Bloods. He was at the forefront of the Keep South at South campaign in 1981 and was elected to the committee, only to resign when the powers of the VFL meant there was no choice but to move to Sydney. We were all devastated. It was in the late 90s and early 2000s when Sydney embraced their former heartland supporters in South Melbourne that Dad's passion was reignited. And then came 2005, the first Swans premiership since 1933. Having been born in 1936, Dad had never experienced a Swans premiership win in his 69 years to date. So this was a very, very special night. He denies his story, but it was at 3 a.m. in the morning as we were walking home from a night of celebration at the Rising Sun Hotel on Eastern Road that he said, "Son, I can die happy now." He lived for another 15 years after that. Dad enjoyed his retirement years. Travel, sport, South Melbourne and family continued to be themes central to his life. He took great delight in welcoming Linda and Rob into the family and watching his grandchildren, Claudia, Jamison and Oscar, grow up. He and Mum have been inseparable for over 55 years of marriage, and their love for each other has been an inspiration to us all. Dad was a man of strong principles. He was not an overtly religious person, but his commitment and devotion to his church as a parishioner of St. Peter and Paul's was resolute, and he goes to God knowing he has lived a good life. Some of Dad's strongest principles were his commitment and his loyalty. Another saying, say what you do and do what you say. He had no time for fast talkers and flash Harrys. If he made a commitment, if he said he was going to do something, he would do it. Sometimes this presented itself as a frustrating stubbornness, but all in all, it is a quality that held him in good stead and was to be admired. Dad was well respected and was seen as a person of rational thought, of calm temperament, and of strong leadership and authority. He held himself well. He was a true gentleman. I remember after games drinks at South Districts in the 80s, and Dad would be there with his friends, Clarkey, Brian, Ron, Norm, Reg and others, enjoying a few refreshments. Players would refer to these club elders and stalwarts by their first names, but when it came to Dad, it was always, hello Mr. Crawford, yes Mr. Crawford, please call me Colin, he would say. But it was still of an era when respect was shown by the way you addressed a person. He didn't demand it, but he commanded it. And so we farewell Colin Thomas Crawford with love. From all his friends, from his siblings, Murray and Jim and their families, from his children, Anne, Jane and myself, from Linda and Rob, from his loving grandchildren, Claudia, Jamison and Oscar, and from his loving wife, Geraldine, who did so much to care for him and tend to his every need, especially for his last few years of life. I love you, Dad. Cheer, cheer, the red and the white.